So I was chilling, waiting for class to start today, doing some light reading, and I found this really good article by Dr. Samuel Renshaw. So I thought we could read it together. Also, where is it? I went to I YouTubed Samuel Renshaw, and the only things that show up are stuff that I've done and this one channel that I don't think is related. So unless see, like, I don't understand. It's like he's been scrubbed. So yeah, we're gonna read this. So let's go back to this. All right. This is Psychology of Vision by Samuel Renshaw, MA, PhD, Ohio State University, part of the Optometric Extension Program, August 1940. So this is in the middle of World War II. Training to Perceive, Part 1, Volume 1, Number 11. When we set ourselves to training a person to perceive rapidly, we must recognize that we are undertaking the reshaping of his functional visual fields. As indicated in the last paper, parts of the material which fall in the periphery beyond the limits of the field of clear form still are important instruments in the dynamic organization of the perception of shape. We must approach the problem, therefore, by the use of very simple material, so that in the first several sittings the subject demonstrates to himself that visual shapes can be seen quickly and easily and with no fear of failure or mistake. Careful verbal instruction as to how the subject shall arrange himself at the apparatus, and particularly what he shall do in the fore period, that is, in getting ready for the exposure, is of the greatest importance. An observer must fixate and accommodate his eyes so that when the exposure comes, no accessory adjustory movements of the eyes are necessary for the clear and sharp imaging on the retina of the visual impression. In addition to this, the subject must be made to realize that he must develop and maintain an active attitude. Seeing the material presented very much resembles the process of reaching out and grasping the material with the hand. Personal comment, this reminds me a lot of the show Elfin Lied, where psychic powers are represented by these kind of ethereal hands reaching out and manipulating reality. Alright, back to the material. The eyes are in one sense a certain highly specialized type of prehensile organ. Experience has shown that it is wise not to interfere with or try to force a new and strange set of grouping habits on the observer in the early stages of training. If, for example, an observer groups digits by 3s or 4s, or even 2s, we let him discover by gradually reducing the time of exposure that he must hurry in order to, quote-unquote, take everything in. Suddenly he discovers that while the physical time remains constant, phenomenal time can be greatly increased by extending the limits of his groups. Training will reach its ultimate level whenever the subject thus can extend the amount of material which can be apprehended in a single rapid exposure. Bennett this year, in our laboratory, trained several observers so that they could accurately reproduce 16 and 17 letter English words in exposures of 1/1000th of a second. In the first few sittings, these same subjects could not successfully perceive simple 6-letter English words in the same time of exposure. A second important consideration, which likewise the subject must learn for himself, is to abandon all thought of utilizing shortcuts, royal roads to learning, etc., because such things prove in the end to be a hindrance rather than a help. Thus, all accessory movements, which are non-visual, are dropped out as early as possible. Using so far as possible the demonstrations method, we arrange conditions so that the subject learns that while the visual impression is delivered to his eyes, lip movements, phonisms, and all inhibiting related processes are reduced to a minimum or completely and eliminated. If improvement is to be extensive and rapid, vision must be given a clear track. Now here's one of the most important considerations in the whole process. As soon as the subject learns to do this, he is surprised at the rapidity with which his span increases. Both children and adults are able in a short time to raise their eyes from the tachistoscope, look at the distant wall, and project a primary memory image of what was exposed to them clearly on the wall surface. This image is not a positive visual after image because it can be held for periods of time and without fading in an entirely different way than the positive or negative after image as these are commonly known. Nor is it a case of eidetic imagery. Here we are dealing with the simplest instance of the memory trace. What happens is most likely that the visual impression leaves in the sensory cerebromotor mechanisms an after effect which can be reconstituted in the same identical fashion that any conditioned response is capable of being evoked. The principle involved is the principle of red integration. When we put in question, what did you just see? The response is a reinstatement in which visual terms of the same focal process which was figural during the period of the visual impression. Like any other habit, this function can be greatly increased by practice or training. Thus in teaching a child to spell English words, when he achieves the skill of redintegrating the visual impression which he clearly saw, and we show him a card containing the same word with some slight misspelling, the reaction, no, that wasn't it, is as certain as it is instantaneous. Leuba has shown that images behave in a fashion which enables us to regard them as conditioned sensations. To quote, our experiments indicate that after an inadequate stimulus has been presented a number of times, while an individual is experiencing such sensations, it will by itself automatically, and without the intervention of any conscious process, produce these sensations. An image can, therefore, be considered as a conditioned sensation. In addition to the above facts, let us consider the following experiment made recently in our laboratory with college students as observers. A 5x6 card containing the following 6 consonants was shown for 1/40th of a second. VMTJWL. At the conclusion of the first exposure, one subject wrote on a slip of paper VTM-JL. A second exposure for the same length of time was given, and another slip of paper the same subject wrote VMT-JL. The third exposure produced the reproduction of VMTJ-L. The fourth exposure, VMTJL-. The fifth exposure gave VMTJHL. The sixth exposure, VMTJWS, and the seventh exposure, VMTJWL, which is perfect. If we carefully examine this rather long and slow process by which the observer is finally enabled to see and reproduce exactly the pattern of letters impressed on his retinas, we first became convinced that the process is a very complex one. Not until the sixth exposure does the letter W appear, and although the letter L in the last position has been seen and correctly reproduced in 4 of the first 5 exposures, it immediately becomes wrongly reproduced in exposure number 6. Notice also the first 3 letters are correctly reproduced from the third exposure on. Invariably, the left-hand portion of the combination of letters, numbers, or other materials is stronger and less likely to error than the portion seen to the right. Ms. Banner several years ago in her laboratory analyzed some 10,000 errors in the reproduction of tachistoscopically exposed figures, and she found that the probability of any figure being incorrectly reproduced varied directly with its position from left to right, the least chance of error being in the first position to the left, and the probability of error steadily increasing in a straight line relationship toward the right. The mere fact that a combination of letters may be seen correctly does not preclude the possibility of their being disarranged in subsequent exposures. For example, the following 6 consonants were similarly exposed to the same subject referred to previously, NCSXZH. After 16 exposures, not a single correct reproduction of this combination was attained. In the first exposure, the letters NCXH were reproduced. In the second exposure, NCSXH- was given. In the 8th exposure, NCSXH dash was given, and in the next or 9th exposure, NSHJ dash dash. Exposures 13, 14, and 15 were all seen identically as NCSX dash H. Number 16 was reproduced as NCSHX dash, which will be noted is identical with the second reproduction. Furthermore, it is noteworthy that the consonant Z in the second from the last position was not once seen and reproduced in any of these 16 exposures, each of 1/40th second duration. Many other interesting facts present themselves when we study carefully day after day the repeated experience of an observer being trained to perceive visually, quickly, and accurately. The only way I can clearly indicate this fact is to cite some actual illustrations. If we show 5 to 8 digits in short exposures of 3 milliseconds, the digits are usually all correctly reproduced, but often in the wrong order. The content of perception thus comes from earlier and is simpler than the achievement of the proper and correct arrangement of this content into exact visual forms which are replicas of the stimulus. For instance, the number 720,549 was shown, and the subject's reproduction was 754,092. Here all the numbers are correctly reproduced but seriously disarranged. When 73584 was shown, the reproduction was 75384. This represents a simple inversion of the second, third digits. I might have just said it the same, which kind of falls into the whole topic. The subject's report, I quote verbatim, "I was not sure about the 8, which may have been in the third position. I am quite sure of the number 753. We have literally thousands of instances of this fact, that the feeling of certainty usually comes after the subject has made his verbal or other motor reproduction of what he has seen, and the chances are about even that this feeling of certainty may accompany an erroneous reproduction of the stimulus or a true one." So that was that article. I hope you found the first part as interesting as I did. And I think I like how they're exploring all the different aspects of the visual perception matrix, or whatever they call it. Scientists back then, I think, were a bit more thorough and dedicated to the art rather than the money.